So that's part of the problem, is not every facility understanding what the field is. And, it's probably because our field is so vast. We have so many facets to it that being able to put it all together into one little package is pretty difficult.
Infection stops where information starts. Welcome to the Transmission Control Podcast, where knowledge is your strongest defense. Broadcasting from the front lines of healthcare, we dive into the strategies, science, and stories shaping infection prevention today. Each episode, we connect you with experts on real-world insights to help you stop the spread of healthcare-associated infections, protect patients, and strengthen your practices as an infection prevention and public health expert. When the right information reaches the right people, lives are saved.
Hello and welcome to the Transmission Control Podcast. My name is Garrett Hollenbeek, Editor-in-Chief, and today Jill Holdsworth and I are going to be talking with Aaron Woodall about his recent election to the Board of Directors for APIC. We're going to be talking about starting education early, how structure and cohesion can transform the field of IP, and have some laughs as we talk about the fun side of a very challenging but very rewarding field to be in. So we'll be right back after a brief word from our sponsors.
Brought to you from the studios of Healthcare HQ, let's get into it. This is Transmission Control.
Hello and welcome to the Transmission Control Podcast. My name is Garrett Hollenbeek, Editor-in-Chief of Transmission Control, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Jill Holdsworth. Jill, how are you today?
Hey, Garrett. I'm doing great.
Yeah, we are excited to have Transmission Control's first returning guest to the podcast, Aaron Woodall. Aaron, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. How are both of you today?
We are
Great.
Good. And, this season is all about championing the victory laps that are going on in infection prevention. And we've talked to guests going everywhere from EVS to point prevalence studies to some upcoming episodes about CAUTI prevention. And this one is a little bit more like our conversation with Dr. Lorenza Howard, where we talked about a personal achievement that is going to have a ripple effect in infection prevention. And that is Aaron Woodall's recent election to the APIC Board of Directors. So congratulations, Aaron.
Thank you, Garrett. I appreciate that.
And for those who missed you on our first, I think season 1 is when we had you on, tell us a little bit about yourself, your career journey, and how infection prevention has shaped that.
So I started in infection prevention getting close to about 20 years ago. I've always been in the federal government, so within the Department of Defense and the Army, and now the Department of Veterans Affairs, so the VA. So I've always been in the federal government doing the same kind of job, but it's taken me across the globe, everywhere from Europe to Middle East to the South, Florida, Puerto Rico, kind of just about anywhere you could think you could put infection prevention into the healthcare system. So inside of it, outside of it, just kind of been doing this for quite a while, enjoying every moment of it.
That's awesome. I love that. I love to hear that you're still enjoying it just as much as you did 20 years ago, and the pressure hasn't scared you off yet.
No, definitely not. I still wake up every day loving what I do, and you can definitely confirm that with my staff, because I know a lot of people will say that, but I so absolutely love it. There's something new every day.
I think we can all tell that too with the really cool posts that you have on LinkedIn, which I really enjoy, especially the Friday at 4 post.
Mm-hmm.
Those ones are fun. Generally, I just come up with some sort of weird situation or kind of capitalize on something that I saw recently and just go with it.
That I meant to reach out to you about this because just in conversation with another IP, they use that term, those Friday at 4 p.m. decisions. And I was like, I wonder if they saw Aaron's posts because, it's just how quickly information spreads and how these kind of terms come into vogue. It's pretty interesting to see because there's a ripple effect to that. And it's pretty great.
Definitely. And I came up with that Friday at 4 p.m. mainly because, when it gets closer to the weekend, about 4 o'clock is when people start to leave and you're like, hey, it's all quiet. And then that's when something just drops on your desk like a sack of bricks and you're like, oh boy, I'm going to be here for a while.
Yeah.
Talk about it. Another kind of cool thing that you've done recently is the apparel line. I don't know if that's what we can call it, but I will say I sport my shirt as often as I can. It's a less infecty, more preventy shirt.
Yeah,
Nice.
I have a lot of fun with that. So an artist that I know that I've gotten to know over the couple of years, and Kelsey, so she helped develop some of that art with me, and we put together some of these pieces of art to put on some shirts and called it Standard Precautions because that sounded cool because obvious reasons, got to be a nerd about it. So yeah, it's just a little side thing to have some fun with.
Well, I certainly have enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I'm glad. I'm glad it resonates with people because I wear this stuff out and, some people will kind of look at you like, what is that? And I'm like, let me tell you.
Conversation piece.
But that makes
It
you
works.
have friends at parties.
Oh, it does. Especially when you're like, hey, don't touch that. Look what that person did. And,
Well, that's what we need. It's that kind of dose of humor in the middle of all the serious stuff that we deal with that makes it kind of gets you through the week. So we like it.
I agree.
Now, Aaron, to kick off this conversation, we wanted to ask you what made you want to run for the APIC Board of Directors and what made that kind of an important part of your career for you?
So I had a lot of push from colleagues of mine within APIC. I've had a lot of friends who've been on the board for, I've been in the field for quite a while. So I've known a lot of board members, but I've always been one of those like, hey, I'm more of the operational side. I'm going to keep everything just pushing forward. And it got to the point to where I feel like that it was time to step into one of these roles and see what would happen if I applied and see if people actually would vote for me. That was one thing. So wasn't totally sure on that one. So I put my name out there and saw what happened. And then the election results came in and I was elected for it. So from that point, it's really interesting that I decided to do it now after such a long time, especially with, being in federal government, you're generally looking at retiring at this point. But for me, I still love it. I still want to make a big impact for everything on the field before I start looking at, retiring in maybe like 50 years.
Yeah, I think that we all feel that way a little bit. And I think everybody's journey, whether on the board or their local APIC chapters or whatever they're doing, it's a little bit different. Some people want to do it early. Some people want to wait until they feel like they're more established. There's never a right or a wrong answer to when should you apply for a leadership position. And every year is different. Myself, it took me 3 tries to get on the APIC Board of Directors. And I'm not ashamed to say that now, but sometimes it's just not your time or it's not your year and you have to keep trying. So for anybody that is thinking about it, if you miss 1 year, keep trying.
I definitely agree with that. Everybody who is interested should always keep going for it, regardless of the prior outcomes. I always tell people never give up, just keep going. So I definitely stand behind that.
That's the way to do it too, because there's so much hesitation, I think, in any leadership role to say, oh, am I the right type of person? There's no one right type of person that's going to serve in these capacities. But when we do have opportunities to affect change at a higher level, that influence is going to carry through. So we all have kind of our own sphere of influence, whether it's at a hospital or a couple of hospitals or even within your own family. Everybody has their sphere of influence, but it's encouraging when you hear people say, I didn't know if I was going to do it. It wasn't like it was my lifelong passion, or I did it, got elected the first year. It's a process, and just waiting for the timing to line up I think that's very real world encouraging.
Aaron, when you think about what you want to do as a board member for APIC, what were you thinking when you first applied? Did you have some goals or some ideas that you wanted to be sure that you could specifically influence?
So for me, a lot of it is really because of what's happening, of what we're seeing in healthcare right now, and a lot of the changes in science, to put that diplomatically. So really focusing on a lot of that and kind of being a good foundation and a voice for it. Also, really looking at the education system and how infection prevention is structured and how it can be integrated significantly enough, starting at the elementary school level, to where if I go into like an elementary school and some kid is like, hey, I want to be an infection preventionist, then I know that I did my job. So that's my goal. That's my dream. So that's where I'm looking to make the biggest impact. So I'm looking at not just, the next 3 years of a term, but, a lot longer down the road.
Absolutely love that. When the pandemic started, I started looking around for books for elementary school age kids that would teach them more about infection prevention or viruses and bacteria in general. And there's really not a lot out there. And that just kind of shows, like if you walk into an elementary school today and say, who wants to be an infection preventionist? They're going to have no idea. They're only going to hear the word infection and think that you have something. That's been my experience.
Absolutely.
Like, oh, don't get near me. But to be able to progress to what you're talking about, it will take a huge shift in the way that we teach kids and just the way that they view healthcare in general. We're not all nurses. We're not all doctors. And my kids still call me a doctor because they don't understand what I do. But how can we get there to where kids are growing up saying, I want to be an IP?
For me, it would really start with the health classes and being able to integrate into that. So looking at the actual structure of what gets taught. So here in Florida, there's a lot of programs that are embedded into like the high school setting that are required. And in the local county of where I'm at, it's called the HOPE class. It is really geared towards health and education and everything within that realm, but they don't really touch on the infection prevention portion. And when I'm referring to infection prevention, it's not just like healthcare disease transmission. I'm really looking at the whole scope of it, at the whole STI range, anything from that end all the way to, epidemiological surveillance on a little basic level. All of that can be integrated into the health classes. And then going down to elementary school, they do really good about teaching washing hands. And that's generally where most people really learn and solidify that skill. So it's the perfect time to capitalize on that with just a little bit more information. When I was asked to come to one of the elementary schools to do the Great American Teach-In, myself and a colleague of mine, we went and talked to, I think, 6 classes. And not a single student was able to tell you what an infection preventionist actually was. Asking them, what do you think one does? They really weren't strong on answering that either. It was generally, you're infected with somebody or you infected somebody. And those were generally the comments you would get. So really focusing on trying to fix that from the beginning. So when they get older, they're not, kind of forgetting that information.
That's the exact right approach. Because, you look at through elementary school and then even in high school, like in my high school, you had an after school program and you could even include it in some of your classes where some kids went and learned welding. You could go work and that's, those kids became welders. So if nobody knows that this field is out here, and it's also a field with a wide range of skill sets. So if you've got that kid, I love math. Okay, great. There's an epidemiology element to it. I love working with people. Great. You'll get to do that too. So you can kind of tailor that pitch so that kids can go into college saying this is a viable career path for me and I get to make an impact. So I think that's not something we've heard on the podcast before, is really building the next generation of IPs?
It's something that we absolutely need to ensure that we start doing, because if you look at some of the studies and some of the work that APIC has done just on the IP population, a lot of the group is aging out. And those coming in is, they're kind of stepping in, they're putting their toes in, and they're going, this is really not for me. I want to do something else. It's because they don't really have a good idea or background of what it is in the first place. So you start younger and you're good. You ask any kid about what they want to be now, and it's, athlete, singer, astronaut, policeman, nurse, doctor, all this kind of stuff. Like, I need one to throw out, I want to be an IP. And if one could say an epidemiologist, man, I'll hire that child right now.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how old they are.
Yeah,
They're
hired.
hired.
They can educate about hand hygiene.
Oh, yeah.
The test number 2 is, can you
That's how you get the
spell in epidemiology. I might miss out on that bonus. I think that approach can kind of allay some of the fears, because kids in elementary school, they're going to be adults someday. And if you grow up with that background of like, there are germs out there are prevention measures that you can take, then you grow up with a lot less fear and a lot less stigma, I think, around it. And that takes
absolutely. Yeah, it does. And I am all up for that work, to be honest. Like, it's something that we really need to do as a field. There is so much information out there that it's coming like a flash flood at you every day, whether it's, accurate or inaccurate or misinterpreted, whatever. It happens so fast with social media. And if the younger generation is not able to tease out what is actually true, we're setting them up for failure, and that's something that I want to absolutely avoid.
It's such a great point, because right now there's so much misinformation, so much confusion, and I think we probably take it for granted because we know the facts, we know the truth, but those out there that are just absorbing what's kind of on social media or their favorite celebrities saying, how are they supposed to figure out what's true or not? And when you have this very impressionable group of kids kind of, coming up, listening to all of this, and things like measles and whooping cough making a comeback, we more than ever need to make sure that people are educated, starting with the children.
Wholly agreed on that.
That goes to a fundamental thing about infection prevention is you always wonder, if somebody had the same information that I have, would they make the same decision? And you can't always educate people who want to be kind of willfully blindsiding of the facts. If somebody doesn't want to learn, they're not going to learn. I think we've all seen that, intentions aside. But even at a young age, everybody has to have information. You think about, one that comes to mind is that vaccinations against things like HPV. Well, the age at which a kid is going to get that, they also need to be informed, because they are then kind of a care partner to their own health, and they're going to need to have good information. And that can go one of two ways. They can get bad information and be terrified and concerned and, increase their risk, or they can have good information and really make good stewardship decisions of their own health. And I think that's empowering, no matter who's getting the information.
I agree. The correct information does need to get out, and it's unfortunate that, if somebody has the best of intentions, let's say somebody that honestly believes that, a certain vaccine or medication is extremely harmful, if they, it's easy to convince somebody based off of that. It's a lot harder to convince somebody that that's not true. So it's a lot of that information being started at a younger age that gives them the tools to be able to decipher that a little bit better.
Yeah. Yep. That's a great descriptor of the role of infection prevention. Here to teach. I mean, that's a primary goal. And it sounds like that's part of your push and perspective coming into this role as a member of the APIC Board of Directors, is educating and empowering frontline IPs.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, what would you say with IP in the role of organizational leaders, educators? What's the biggest need that you're seeing in the field of infection prevention right now?
So this might be a little controversial, but We as a field really need cohesion. We're not really a unified discipline, and there's so many little fragments that we have that kind of hold us, kind of back. So if you look at quality management departments are like really, really formalized. They have a lot of formal metrics that span healthcare in many different directions. They have really dedicated lanes to it. And it's something that the infection prevention field doesn't really have. So that's something that we really have to work on to be able to continue to show that infection prevention is not a tiny program. It's actually a function. It's a department. It's ingrained into the healthcare system. So I would say that that's probably the most urgent thing that we as a field really need to work on is being a lot more cohesive together, a lot more structured, and have a really, really strong foundation amongst all healthcare.
Yeah, and I think that goes along too with making sure our executive leadership and C-suite leaders see not just who we are, but really what we do in totality. It's this same thing is like we don't just tell people to wash their hands. Like we really need to target these upper leaders because that's who will ultimately listen to the results of the staffing calculator, for instance. You can do the staffing calculator and it may say you need 10 more employees, but if your executive leaders don't really value what you do, then they're going to be like, nah, you're fine. So I think that cohesion can really help as an industry because we can really start targeting those leaders to really appreciate the role.
I totally agree. I think most organizations don't really know what an infection preventionist actually is. They know that there's some sort of requirement for it, and this is where, we run into issues like CMS kind of setting us up for a little bit of failure with the designated versus an actual dedicated individual. So things like that from the top down, yeah, absolutely. Leadership needs to really understand, but it's kind of difficult at the same time to, convey the importance as a field and industry if it's not cohesively together. But absolutely, leadership has to be on board. They have to understand the tools that we have, like the APIC staffing calculator. It will tell you exactly what you need for your facility. And it's one of those little truth nuggets that we hold and we, take to leadership, but they just don't understand the value of it. And, policy wise, federal policy coming down, that's kind of where we see a little bit of that disconnect and, spilling into the healthcare systems of, well, I don't really see anything that absolutely says I must completely have an infection preventionist, or it just says on our survey that we just have to have an infection prevention program. It doesn't define the program. So I can define the program as, well, we have PPE, we have hand sanitizer, we have sinks, we have biohazardous waste cans and so forth. So that's part of the problem is not every facility understanding what the field is. And, it's probably because our field is so vast. We have so many facets to it that being able to put it all together into one little package is pretty difficult.
I agree with that 100%. It's almost like if everything's important, nothing's important. And in other disciplines, you could say, these are the 5 things that I focus on. But in IP, you may be talking to 10 different departments about 10 different deviations, and it kind of gets lost, the importance that IP has. Now, if you were to see a fully built out, fully invested infection prevention program, let's say all the leaders were on board, you had all the money in the world and all the staff that you could use, what do you think some of the big changes, what big changes do you think we would see?
So I'm probably shooting for the stars here, but I'm really looking for like federal national investment into the infection prevention field. I'm really looking for stronger development with it. A lot of scholarships, grants, formalized pathways, and then really recognizing infection prevention and as a specialty with, that is consistently growing. Our field is asked of so much. So that's really where I would love to expand on if I had unlimited resources. Is just starting from the national, federal side, really focusing on developing the workforce of infection prevention.
Do you think some of that is because there's nobody or very few people, none that I'm aware of, go to college and they're like, I got my degree in infection prevention. There's these other fields that we pull in from, but there's not a direct route where somebody says, this is what I want to do. Wanted to do it since Aaron Woodall talked to me in elementary school, and this is the degree that I'm getting. Is that one of the weaknesses around the structure that we're lacking?
100%. 100%. So I believe there's like very few schools out there globally, in universities that have an actual, a degree producing program. It's so limited. And then within the US, there's a few certificate programs, but, you know, you're in school around middle school. I would say around middle school, a lot of students start to really think about what they're going to be, and they say, okay, well, if I'm going to be a nurse, I need to go to nursing school, so I need to look for those. If I need to go to be a state trooper, then I have to go to the academy. If I want to be an officer in the military, I need to have a degree, or I can go to the military colleges. Like, there's a set point and there's a goal that they can see. We don't have that in our field, which is what makes it difficult. It's kind of one of those things that people just will fall into right now. I heard through word of mouth, or, I have an MPH, and this is what I love about MPHs. They come to the table and they say, hey, I heard about infection prevention and healthcare. How do I get in? There's really no good, there's no pathway. You kind of have to force, and you're playing the luck game when it comes to breaking into the field. So not having like a clear pathway that you can see the end of the tunnel, like, hey, that's where I'm shooting for because that's where I want to be at the end of this. It's something that we lack and something that we absolutely desperately need. So that's where, that framework I was mentioning with absolute unlimited funds is really investing into that, whole structure of it into the university systems to have a degree program with it. Where it would be really, really interesting, and it would be, where does it fall in a university? Does it fall in nursing? Does it fall in medicine? Does it fall in public health? Does it fall in a whole brand new lane? And this is where we have to start getting all on the same page with each other.
I think that would be fascinating to see colleges start to go in that direction of saying, this is a field that it's highly specialized, it's very unique, and it's going to pull from a lot of different other specialties to be good at it. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to develop this as a very unique program that's very necessary, but unlike something we have now. Now, over the course of it, because it's a 3-year tenure on the board of directors, but if we zoom out 5 and 10 years, what do you hope to see or accomplish or have change as a result of your presence on the board?
So I would really like, in the short term, really looking at clearer definitions of what our field is, and then more consistent expectations of facilities. I have a lot of individuals reach out to me asking, how do I onboard somebody? Or, how do I define what an infection preventionist does in my facility? We don't really have a lot of consistency. And I know we have some things like some policies behind like paywall with APIC, which some people really struggle with due to the cost. So they're really reaching out through the network and grapevine of just, hey, what do you have? And then, you play that game of telephone, and then, things get jumbled up by the time they get to where they're, needing to be. So really structuring that, getting that clear, and just having federal and national clarity on what infection preventionists are, what they do, where they should be, and how they should be perceived. I mean, I don't know this is kind of undershooting, but starting a conversation within that 5 to 10 year frame of, nursing needs a license to be one. A barber needs a license to be one. Cosmetologist needs a license. It would make sense for a highly specialized role to have a license as well.
I think that would really change the game and also change the pipeline. You would go from your IP leaves or goes to a different organization. You're just hoping somebody wants to do that or somebody moves into your area that has IP experience to a dedicated pipeline of educated, prepared professionals that are ready to kind of have an impact in that.
Now, you would essentially have structured infection prevention as a very, very firm and established standalone discipline, and not kind of just like we're here and this is kind of what we do.
Yeah.
I'm really looking for like strong foundation that is sustained through decades.
I think it's absolutely doable, and it's going to take time and take dedicated leaders and also conversations like this where we're talking about what the future of IP looks like and more formalized, more structured programs where the discipline has the weight that it needs to keep patients safe. So as we wrap up, Aaron, I want to ask you any advice that you would give to IPs early in their career preparing for leadership positions?
So the field that we have is within a great big world of healthcare, and it's so much bigger than most people think. What I really would like to convey to people is to always look outside the box. If we just focus on infection prevention within healthcare only, it kind of short-sights us. There is so many other avenues outside of healthcare that our field and our roles can do and be. And so for anybody who is looking at leadership roles, really look at everything. Don't just look in your own little lane of, HAI surveillance or hand hygiene surveillance or, small little facets of what you do. Really start being creative, really start looking outside of the box and seeing where you can make some impact even in the community with what we do. And that really will highlight your role as one, as a leader, and then two, as a field.
Well, Aaron, we want to thank you so much for the advice and the expertise and also just the encouragement for all IPs working out there to look outside the box, make those dedicated pathways and have an impact. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. The goal is to have fun with this field just as much as I have every day. And I hope everybody does, because this is literally the best field that you can be in.
You cannot have a better endorsement than that. Thank you for joining us. And thank you, Jill. We'll catch everybody on the next episode of Season 3 Transmission Control. Thank you.
That was a lot of fun. It's always great to have Aaron on the podcast. And one of the things that I really enjoyed talking about was really targeting those younger age groups and elementary school age kids so that people can grow up saying, I want to be an IP. I don't know that any of us necessarily grew up even knowing what IP was. And I think we're kind of still stuck in that rut. So I love that somebody really has their focus on teaching and growing the next generation, especially with the misinformation and confusion we have out there.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That was something I'm glad we discussed, was really starting that education early, because it is the fundamentals of IP that keep patients safe throughout your whole career. And I'm excited to see what Aaron accomplishes on the board of directors and see how this field continues to get better and better. So I want to thank everybody for listening to this week's episode of the Transmission Control Podcast. Be sure to like, follow, subscribe, repost, catch us on every channel, because we all know infection stops where information starts.
Thanks for tuning in to the Transmission Control Podcast, where infection stops because information starts. If you enjoyed this episode, let us know. Connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to leave a 5-star rating and share this episode with your team. Until next time, stay informed, stay vigilant, and keep transmission under control.